To all Queenslanders, thank you once again. This is all about you. It will always be about you. With your support, with the support of all Queenslanders, we pledge tonight to make this great state a can-do place once more. Thank you.
That right there was Campbell Newman's victory speech after winning the 2012 election for Queensland. And there's no two ways about this. It was as big a whitewash as they come, as he absolutely smashed the Labor government's 78 seats to 7. And for those who don't know, Queensland has no upper house, meaning that Labor was absolutely powerless in stopping any policy Newman wished to pass. At that point in history, it was the largest majority in state or federal Australian history. But here's the crazy thing. This right here is the 2015 election map, and as we zoom into Brisbane, we can see a whole lot of red. That's because just one term later, Newman squandered his 71 seat advantage to lose to Anastasia Palaszczuk 44 seats to 42. This is the wild story of how Campbell Newman almost stole Queensland. But before we get into it, I firstly want to thank Atlas VPN for sponsoring a video like this on Queensland politics. So as we've alluded to many times on the pod, we're huge fans of the UK office, but Netflix Australia has long taken it down. However, with Atlas VPN, all you have to do is change over to Ireland and Gareth Kanan, yes Gareth, not Dwight, can remain on your screen as long as you want. Right now, Atlas VPN Premium is just $1.83 per month plus 3 months extra with a 30-day money-back guarantee. That's 86% off. You can take this limited time offer by clicking the link in the video description below. Atlas VPN keeps your Google searches private, blocks all malicious links, ads and trackers, allows you to save while online shopping by showing you the best available deals, and a single subscription protects an unlimited amount of devices. As someone who spends a copious amount of time deep diving the net for research, I find this to be the best VPN on the market. Grab summer deal because again, for a limited time only, VPN Premium is just $1.83 per month plus 3 months extra with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Protect your privacy and get the many benefits of Atlas VPN for this ridiculously low price. You can take this deal by clicking the link below. Be quick, as it's a limited time offer. Now, before we get into the story in 2012, we have to begin beforehand with this grainy footage from 2004. While I was busy grinding against Dr. Nefarious, Newman was elected the Lord Mayor of Queensland, and during his time in office, his stock was really high. Not only did Newman win re-election in 2008, but he was also shortlisted in the 2010 World Mayor Prize, in which he came 5th out of the top 25 nominees across the world. Having also been an engineer for the army, he was held in pretty high regard in Brisbane, and a fair comparison would be to Boris Johnson during his time as Mayor of London. Now, at the turn of the decade, the Queensland Coalition was in a pretty dire place. They hadn't won a majority in an election since the Jobioki-Peterson days, and they only had one safe seat in Brisbane. As a result, the Liberal and National parties agreed it would be best to make their close relationship into a marriage and become the official Liberal National Party of Queensland. That being said, it still wasn't enough to defeat Anna Bligh in the 2009 election, and they only held 34 out of 89 seats. So as 2011 rolled around and as Anna Bligh gained popularity from her response to the Queensland floods, the LNP needed an emergency option. And Newman could be the answer to their prayers. So Bruce McIver, the LNP president, essentially contacted Newman and asked him to replace Bruce Flegg in their only safe seat in Moggill with the view of then challenging for the leadership. Quite surprisingly, Newman went for a different route, asking for pre-selection in a Labor-held seat, Ashgrove, and said that if he were to win pre-selection, he'd then bid for the leadership, despite not actually holding the seat of Ashgrove at the time. Now, Ashgrove was a safe Labor seat as they held it by 7% in 2009, but Newman represented the same area in Brisbane as he'd represented the gap at the Brisbane Local Council. Upon the news of Newman entering state parliament, the LNP opposition leader John Paul Langbroke stood down and Newman became the new opposition leader. But remember, before the election he didn't actually hold a seat, and so Jeff Seeney was technically opposition leader within parliament. And so as we saw at the start, Newman shredded the 2012 election and the LNP won an unheard of 37 seats in Brisbane, proving that McIver's call to parachute Newman in was a tactical masterstroke. It was also a record-breaking election as it was the first time any Australian leader had led a party to victory whilst not in office themselves since Federation. For Newman, his messaging was clear. It was time to remove the green tape that had held back Queensland and approve a whole lot of mining projects to move the state forward. And I want to begin with the whole idea of green tape, i.e. environmental protection laws and procedures that slow down economic growth. So with its huge coastline, Queensland's obviously filled with ports, particularly for coal exports. However, developing these ports involves something called dredging. Now, if you've forgotten Year 9 geography, firstly, put your best geography memories in the comments, but secondly, dredging is essentially digging the sediment from the ocean floor, and that sediment is then dumped somewhere else. However, when dredging takes place off the coast of Queensland, it's taking place in the Coral Sea. And when that sediment is dumped in the water, it can drift for over 100 kilometres, killing coral, ruining water quality, and destroying seagrass beds. It's estimated that dredging doubles coral disease. And so in 2012, UNESCO released a report on the Great Barrier Reef, warning that it could be listed as a World Heritage Site in danger, and strongly advised the Queensland government not to proceed with any further port development projects. Newman disregarded this report, saying that Queensland was in the coal business, and proceeded with a plan to upgrade 5 Queensland ports into megaports, those being Gladstone, Hay Point, Mackay, Abbott Point, and Townsville. Now, although Newman promised that they wouldn't use dredging to build those ports, dredging was still being used to maintain 20 existing ports. On top of that, Newman planned to upgrade coal production by subsidising the extraction of coal right here in the Galilee Basin. The main company involved in the process was Adani Mining, the Australian branch of the Indian power company Adani Enterprises. But also involved was another Indian company called GVK Power. Now, for any Indian viewers, I am about to have a go at these companies, but as a gesture of goodwill, here's Sachin Tendulkar's double century in Sydney. So essentially, Gina Rinehart's company, Hancock Prospecting, owned the leases to many key coal reserves, and so as Newman gave the green light to mining the Galilee Basin, GVK agreed to pay Gina Rinehart $560 million for the rights to the leases. Altogether, 48 leases were granted, Newman paid Adani $450 million to come out and mine, and from 2008 to 2014, total coal subsidies amounted to $8 billion. But despite Newman's promises to make Queensland a coal powerhouse, there was huge backlash at his coal drive. Much of Queensland's population worked in tourism, and so coal also posed a significant threat to their livelihood as it was so clearly poisoning the reef. Firstly, it created a huge impetus for more ports, which meant more dredging. Secondly, there were large amounts of coal pollution discharged into the reef, with Adani exceeding their limit by 800% in Abbott Point. And then finally, of course, burning coal puts more carbon into the atmosphere, which heats the planet. Well, as the loony left would have you believe, and that causes coral to bleach. So the Newman government had more or less taken a sledgehammer to the reef by doubling down on its coal plan. But it wasn't just the coral reef that started to make Newman really unpopular. If you have a look at his website, one of the things that Newman marks as an achievement is reducing the workforce. Yep, his words, not mine. Now in Queensland, the public sector makes up a larger chunk of the economy than, say, New South Wales because of the pretty huge distances between cities. Seriously, Brisbane to Cairns is a 20-hour drive, whereas Brisbane to Melbourne is an 18-hour drive. Queensland also has no huge central population. Brisbane makes up 44% of Queensland's population compared to Sydney making up 62.5% of New South Wales's, and Melbourne making up 76% of Victoria's. So this means that in Queensland there are more people working in hospitals and town planning than in large corporations. Let me know in the comments below, what's Australia's best regional town? So in Newman's first year, 2,700 jobs were cut from health alone, and the number totaled to 12,000 across all public servants. Newman also ordered the former Treasurer of Australia, Peter Costello, to conduct an audit of Queensland's finances, with the audit reporting that Queensland was at risk of being $92 billion in debt. Newman then used this as a justification to begin a privatisation drive. Now, interestingly, Newman had promised not to sell off any of Queensland's ports, and to be fair, he kept that promise, technically. Rather than sell the ports, Newman proposed leasing Townsville and Gladstone for 50 years, with an option to renew for a further 49 years. On top of that, Newman went to the election proposing to sell off 11% of Queensland's state-owned assets, with sales of things like the electricity grid, industrial pipelines, and the Mount Isa rail line. He promised that this revenue would go towards reducing Queensland's debt. However, with 25,000 public sector jobs lost and an unemployment rate that had risen by over a percentage point to 6.9%, he was badly losing his Brisbane charm. This then was made significantly worse when he was exposed in a New South Wales corruption story. So the New South Wales ICAC was investigating disgraced New South Wales Labor MP Eddie Obeid over him influencing the state government to give lucrative contracts to Australian Water Holdings, which at the time he was alleged to have a $3 million stake in. An honest mistake we've all made, right? Like the video if you agree. Well, part of the investigation involved this guy, Paul Nicolau, a Liberal Party fundraiser. We'll say he looked like this. Giving evidence, Nicolau presented an email that showed him being the middleman between Australian Water Holdings and Newman when Newman was the Mayor of Brisbane. In the email, Nicolau says, quote unquote, "The Lord Mayor of Brisbane is happy to see you. The person whom I am liaising with on your behalf would like you to donate the 5k as soon as possible." In case you were wondering, that $5,000 was to be donated to the Forward Brisbane Leadership Fund, essentially Newman's campaigning fund, which peaked in donations during election years. The Liberal Party had earlier ordered it to be shut down after it was being investigated for receiving $72,000 in donations from Philip Usher Constructions, who then the next month won a development application to build above a Russian Orthodox cathedral in South Brisbane in 2011. So this is pretty clear evidence of a bribe, right? Well, Newman's defence was that he himself never asked for a campaign donation and that Nicolau went rogue. Still, shouldn't this at least warrant the Crime and Corruption Commission, their version of ICAC, to investigate Newman? Well, just a year before, Newman really took the teeth out of the Corruption Commission. So back in 2013, it was known as the Crime and Misconduct Commission, and Newman passed a bill that no longer required both Liberal and Labor to agree on the appointees at the higher level of the commission. As well as this, the Commission needed the Attorney General's permission to investigate corruption, and this was all on top of the fact that Newman's Attorney General overrode a unanimous vote at the Liberal National Party July 2013 State Convention, which required candidates to make full disclosure of their criminal history. Queensland's Corruption Commission was made to be quite partisan. But perhaps most scandalous of all, Newman got rid of the Premier's reading challenge. For real, I'm not joking. Queensland kids got no points on the board for reading The Day My Bum Went Psycho. I guess I should also add that Liberal and Labor gave bipartisan support for laws that address bikie gangs by name, like the Bandidos and the Mongols, and restricted their members' meetings and increased minimum sentences for their crimes. But going into 2015, somehow, against all odds, Newman looked like he might be in jeopardy of losing his massive majority. And what didn't help was that he unwittingly picked a fight with the wrong guy, Alan Jones. Didn't think I'd mention him, right? Now I'm going to ask my viewers to suspend their judgment of Jones and just focus on this one fact. Well, it's not a fact at all, it's entirely opinion, but I digress. He probably has the best judgment for what your average Australian over the age of 50 thinks. And for an LNP candidate to lose the support of Jones is pretty much a death wish. So Jones grew up in the town of Ackland, which is about 50 kilometres northwest of Toowoomba. Now Jones's family were dairy farmers, and quite simply, Jones had a huge personal gripe with Newman for approving a mining expansion into Ackland, which would really damage the town's agricultural prospects. Now, Jones used pretty colourful language to express his disgust, accusing Newman of prostituting himself to the mining lobby and insinuating that the mining was happening because of a $700,000 donation from New Hope Coal to the Liberal Party. Jones actually does some mad coverage from time to time. But what's even more crazy than Jones going after the mining lobby was that Newman then sued Jones for defamation for quote-unquote the sensational tone of the accusation and for suggesting he'd effectively taken a bribe from New Hope Coal. On the eve of the election, a bizarre duo teamed up to take down Newman. First, of course, was Jones, but then there was Tony Fitzgerald, as in the guy who led the Fitzgerald Commission to take down Joh Bjelke-Petersen, and together the two penned an open letter condemning Newman for misusing his constitutional powers. As we showed you right at the beginning, Newman lost 36 seats as the Libs went down to Labor 44 to 42. Quite frankly, Anastasia Palaszczuk did not expect to be the one who led Labor back into government, because after the 2012 election, Labor was preparing for at least a decade in opposition. But in just 3 years, Australia's largest ever majority government had gone back into opposition. The whole situation left Newman with egg on his face as he said that his political career was over and he dropped the case against Alan Jones. This bizarre chapter in Australian history had come to an end and the Great Barrier Reef could start to breathe again. But Newman wasn't really done as he returned to contest in the 2022 federal election. Oh, you know you can't click off now. You simply cannot talk about Queensland corruption without looking into the wild years that Joh Bjelke-Petersen had in office. Do you know his police commissioner took $700,000 in bribes? Click here to learn all about it.